For some of you, this is the last week to make a trade in your fantasy football league. For others, you maybe have this week and next week, maybe 3 weeks at the most, but time is running out to make a blockbuster trade. But don't worry, I've got more than 10 players I think you should go buy low on right now from all different positions. These are guys that can help you not only right now, but also have great playoff schedules, meaning in the fantasy playoffs, when it matters most, these guys could absolutely explode. Now, before I get into the players, I want to talk a little bit about what I am using here. I am using a site called fantasycalc.com, and what's great about this site is these aren't just their rankings, who they think should be valued where. They look at literally over 5 million fantasy football real leagues, look at trades that go down in those leagues, and then their algorithm calculates how players should be valued based on who's trading who for who. If that makes sense. Not only that, this is updated continuously throughout the day. It's updated every 3 hours all day long. So sure, maybe if you're watching this later in the week, it has changed because values have changed. But as of right now, this is how fantasy players like you and me are valuing these guys. And I think this is a great time to go buy low on these specific players. And let's start with the group that I kind of call like potential league winners here, like guys that could absolutely be studs for you, especially in the fantasy playoffs. Talking about guys like running backs like Quinshon Judkins, Chase Brown, and wide receivers like A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith. Now, I did talk about Devonta Smith on last week's buy low video, but I'm going to include him here because he's being valued very similarly to A.J. Brown, and honestly, I feel pretty similar about these guys. So let's dive into each one individually here, and I'll tell you why I like these players. And then I'll show you the players being valued around them and who I would trade away. All right, let's start with Quinshon Judkins. And you look at it from week 3 to week 8, because remember, he was on the bye last week. And remember, week 3 was kind of like, that was the first week where it's like, okay, he's good, he's here, he's playing, he's good to go. He actually leads all running backs in total rush attempts over that stretch at 108. Yes, more rush attempts than any other running back over that stretch. Not to mention, he's 12th in expected fantasy points per game at 15.1 expected fantasy points over that stretch. So we're talking about a guy, we know he's going to get the bulk of the carries here. He's been mostly good this season. He gets the goal line run, and you look at his schedule, it's fantastic. Okay, this week, coming out of the bye, he does get the Jets. That's not ideal. But then the Ravens, the Raiders, okay, Niners tough. But then look at the finishing stretch here. Titans, Bears, Bills, Steelers in week 17. And look, if for some reason your league makes you play in week 18, he gets the Bengals. This is a fantastic schedule for Quinshon Judkins. This is a guy who, before the bye week, did not have a very good game, then suffered a shoulder injury. His value has dropped, but now he's coming out of the bye. It doesn't sound like the shoulder injury is serious at all. Sounds like he's going to be fine here for week 10. Go buy low on Quinshon Judkins right now while you can before he explodes. And then Chase Brown has definitely been one of the most disappointing draft picks in fantasy this year, but he's now had back-to-back pretty good games here, but still think there's a great buy low opportunity. His value has not caught up to really where it should be, especially the way this offense has looked with Joe Flacco. But what I really like here, this was kind of missed. This kind of didn't get a lot of publicity here, a lot of news, but Samaje Perine, who had been coming on, getting more touches, left that game very, very early. He's now week to week with an ankle injury, could go on IR here. We don't know at the time I'm recording this, but that opened the door for Chase Brown to once again be an absolute workhorse. You look at it in week 9, he played 95% of the snaps, had 11 attempts, which is 73.3% of the backfield attempts, ran 82% of the routes, and had 30.4 expected fantasy points. This is the Chase Brown we saw last year. If Samaje Perine is going to be out, I am not worried about Taj Brooks taking on a bigger role here. It's going to be all Chase Brown in this offense. And once again, take a look at this schedule. All right, this week, heading into the bye, of course, which right there makes him a good buy low opportunity. But then the Steelers coming out of the bye, that's a smash. All right, Patriots tough. But then look at it. Ravens, Bills, Ravens, Dolphins, Cardinals. You shouldn't be scared of any of those matchups. And with Joe Flacco under center and this defense being horrible, they're probably going to trade Trey Hendrickson. That's what they're saying. This defense is just going to get worse. This offense is going to need to score 30, 40 points every single week. And Chase Brown is going to be a huge part of it. I really think Chase Brown, rest of the season, is going to be an RB1 for fantasy. He's going to pay off his second, third round draft pick, but you don't have to pay those kind of prices right now. And I talked about A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith. I think both are fantastic buy lows right now coming out of the team's bye. You look at it right now, they rank 11th and 12th among all wide receivers in first read percentage. This is exactly what we want for fantasy. Just two guys that are the clear number one and number two. They're also very close in expected fantasy points per game. A.J. Brown, 12.8. Devonta Smith, 13.5. I really can't say I prefer one strongly over the other. I mean, I probably have to prefer A.J. Brown here. Both are being valued pretty similarly right now. And of course, both have the same fantastic schedule rest of the season. All right, coming out of the bye, they do have to go on the road against Green Bay this week. That is not great, but then they get the Lions at home, the Cowboys, the Bears. Okay, the Chargers week 14, that is a semi-tough matchup. But then look at the playoffs. The Raiders, the Commanders, who just gave up a touchdown on almost every drive to the Seahawks on Sunday night, and then the Bills in week 17. These guys could absolutely explode in the fantasy playoffs and just go absolutely crazy for fantasy teams. Be guys who didn't necessarily do a ton during the season, but win championships when it matters most. And they're not being valued where they should be valued right now because they've both been disappointing based on where they were drafted. And so now when we look at Fantasy Calc here and we look at the chart and we see these guys on here, we see Quinshon Judkins has a value of about 29, A.J. Brown 26, Chase Brown also 26, and Devonta Smith 22. So they're all pretty similar here. And when we look at guys grouped around them that I would be willing to trade away, I'm going to start with Omarion Hampton. I've said it now. I don't think we're going to see Omarion Hampton until week 13 at the earliest, which is after the Chargers bye. And then we don't even know what kind of backfield he's walking into. Is it going to be a split with him and Vidal? Go trade Omarion Hampton right now if you can. And I will say, I like Michael Pittman, and I think Michael Pittman is fine. Now, I'm not saying he's a guy I'm worried about. But if I can get guys like A.J. Brown, Chase Brown, or Quinshon Judkins for Michael Pittman, specifically I would say Quinshon Judkins and Chase Brown, like if I'm good at wide receiver but I need running back help, I think that is definitely more than fair. And if someone is willing to trade for DK Metcalf right now, go ahead, give me any of these players over DK Metcalf. DK Metcalf, yeah, he's coming off a down game here, but he's mostly been pretty good this year. He has name value. If somebody wants to give me DK Metcalf for these guys, I would take it. All right, real quick, before I get to the rest of the list, if you're enjoying this video right here or any of the videos we put out for you on a weekly basis, take 1 second, hit that subscribe button. It's very easy to do, but it helps us out tremendously. We're trying to get to 100K subscribers by the end of the year. It's not looking good. The pace has slowed considerably. So if you can do us a favor and you're enjoying the content, take 1 second out of your day, subscribe to the channel. All right, let's move down to another wide receiver that I think is a fantastic buy low right now, and that is Courtland Sutton. Right now on the season, you look at it, he's the wide receiver 22 in expected fantasy points per game at 14.1, a very, very solid number there. But he's a guy who's kind of been pretty boom bust this year. You look at it, in 5 of his games, he's scored at least 16.7 PPR points or more. And you look at it in the other games, he's got 10 or less PPR points. But he's had a rough stretch here. I mean, he had to play the Eagles in week 5, but he still had a nice game. Had to play the Jets and Sauce Gardner in week 6, did not have a nice game. The Giants are not a smash matchup, had a nice game. Okay, he did disappoint against Dallas, of course, but he dropped a touchdown in that game. And of course, coming off a brutal matchup this week against Houston, where all he did was catch one 30-yard touchdown. So I think people are a little on the fence about how to value Courtland Sutton or how to feel about Courtland Sutton right now. But again, I'm going to keep talking about it. Look at the schedule for Courtland Sutton this week. The Raiders, that should be great. Chiefs, okay, that's a tough matchup. Then the bye week. But then he comes out of the bye, he gets the Commanders and the Raiders, both smash spots there. All right, Green Bay, a little difficult. But then the Jags in week 16, the Chiefs. I don't think these matchups necessarily scare me off Courtland Sutton. We've seen, even in tough matchups, he can come through. I think this is a great time to go buy low on Courtland Sutton if you're looking for like a wide receiver 2 with upside. And when we look at it here, he has a value on Fantasy Calc of 18 right now. And guys going around him that I'd trade away, look, I want to believe in the Ted McMillan breakout, but I don't think it's going to happen with Bryce Young. I just don't. It just doesn't look like Bryce Young is making that leap. And like the Panthers are running the ball so well, they just don't need to throw a lot. So I would rather have Courtland Sutton here. And then I'll say Drake May, if you maybe have a stud quarterback and you just added Drake May off the waiver wire 1 week for bye weeks and he's just been sitting on your bench and somebody needs a quarterback, I would go ahead and trade Drake May for Sutton. And then I'll say Travis Etienne. I'm not out on Travis Etienne, and he did get great usage coming out of the bye here in week 9, but he's got a brutal playoff schedule for running backs, one of the worst. I would just go ahead and take Courtland Sutton now. Again, if I'm deep at running back and I don't necessarily need Travis Etienne, but I need the wide receiver help. All right, now let's move on to another wide receiver and a tight end. Yes, I'm going to recommend some tight ends I think you could buy low on because, look, this is a time where you need to shore up your roster. And if the rest of your roster is pretty good, but you need tight end help, go ahead, get a tight end. But let's start with wide receiver Jordan Addison. I talked about him on last week's buy low. Did not have a nice game here with J.J. McCarthy. And now people are getting worried, like maybe J.J. McCarthy won't be as good for him as Carson Wentz was. But you look at it. You look at the Vikings pass catchers in week 9. He ran 87% of the routes. He was clearly the number 2 first read here. Obviously, Justin Jefferson number 1, but that's to be expected. Okay, his targets per route run were a little less than Jalen Naylor, but he still had the second most expected fantasy points per game at 8.6. And I said it on the Star Sit video. That was not a good schematic matchup for Jordan Addison. But the Vikings have a fantastic schedule for wide receivers. This week, the Ravens. Now, they're getting a little healthier, but I'm still not scared. Then the Bears. Okay, Green Bay, not great. Seattle, not great. But then look at this finishing stretch. The Commanders, the Cowboys, the Giants. Okay, week 17, he does get that Lions matchup again. Again, the way they play their coverage shells is not great for Jordan Addison. But they are going to be at home in that game, and it's your championship game. Those games from 14 through 16, he could absolutely go off in those games. So I'm still going to go buy low on Jordan Addison if I can. And then Sam Laporta has been kind of boom bust for a tight end. You look at it, he has 4 games where he's got double-digit fantasy points in PPR. He's gone over 16 fantasy points in 3 of those games. Then he has another 4 games where he's got less than 10 fantasy points. But we know he's still a big part of this offense, and we've seen him have those boom games in great matchups, and he gets great matchups, especially in the playoffs. This week, Washington, that's a smash. Eagles, okay, that's tough. Giants, okay. Green Bay's actually been sneaky bad against tight ends. But then look at this finishing stretch. The Cowboys, the Rams, the Steelers, then the Vikings. Okay, Vikings not a smash spot, but come on. Cowboys, Rams, Steelers, he could go off in all of those games. This is a guy you can go out. He's not being valued very high right now. He's a set and forget tight end with week winning upside. Go put out some feelers for Sam Laporta if you need tight end help. And again, when we look at it here, Jordan Addison currently has a value of 9. Sam Laporta only a value of 8. I mean, look at players being valued ahead of them. TreVeyon Henderson at 11. Why? I mean, he was okay this week, but I don't think he's ever going to take over this backfield. Look, if I need a wide receiver or a tight end and TreVeyon Henderson's just chilling on my bench at running back, yeah, give me these guys. And look, Monty is fine. Monty's coming off another nice game. He's solid, but we've seen he can also have games where he disappears. Once again, if I need wide receiver or tight end help, I'm deep at running back. I'll go ahead and trade Monty. Same with Tyrone Tracy. He wasn't even the lead back. He pretty much split with Devin Singletary. If there's any sell high window here, go do it. And then Alvin Kamara just living off name value here. This guy's been horrible. I don't know why people still valuing this guy. But yeah, go ahead, trade away Alvin Kamara. And then I'll say Keenan Allen, Deebo Samuel in this Commanders offense now. That's probably going to be looking at Marcus Mariota for most or all of the season. And Keenan Allen has kind of been trending the wrong way for the Chargers. Again, I would rather chase the upside of a wide receiver like Jordan Addison, or if I need a strong tight end that I don't have to think about and I'm deep at wide receiver, I'll go ahead and flip these guys for Sam Laporta. And then the last group I want to talk about here, these are the guys that are very low-hanging fruit, but they can round out a roster. Like, these are the guys, like, if you already have studs and you just need those guys to, like, round out your roster, you can get these guys pretty easily, but they have great upside rest of the season and in the fantasy playoffs. And let's start with Aaron Jones. You look at it in that game in week 9, returning from the injury, the first half before he suffered that shoulder injury in the third quarter, he was dominating the usage. He had played 76% of the snaps. He had out-carried Jordan Mason 7-2, and he had ran almost 60% of the routes, and just in the first half alone had 6.2 expected fantasy points. Now, he injured his shoulder in that game, but it doesn't sound serious. It sounds very minor here. So, look, maybe we don't have Aaron Jones this week, but when he comes back, we should feel pretty good that he's walking into the lead back role here. And the Vikings have maybe the best playoff schedule for running backs here. I mean, even their whole schedule, Ravens, Bears, fantastic. Okay, Packers, Seattle, that's tough. But then the Commanders, the Cowboys, the Giants, are you kidding me? He could go nuclear. He could just explode in those games. Lions, week 17, not the best spot, but that's not going to scare me off Aaron Jones. Fantastic schedule here for a running back that could be your every week RB2 and is going to cost you very little. And then I have my doubts if we're ever going to see Ricky Pearsall again this year, but if we do, I think you're going to want him on your fantasy team. You look at it, in the first 4 weeks when he actually played, he was the wide receiver 16 in expected fantasy points per game at 15.1. I mean, had more expected fantasy points over that stretch than guys like JSN, Emeka Egbuka, Justin Jefferson, Nico Collins. He was playing very well. And in those first 4 games, he had 6 or more targets in every single game, went over 100 yards in 2 of those games, and still had 46 and 56 yards in the other games. So it wasn't like he wasn't at least giving you a floor every week. And then you want to talk about schedule. If he can play this week, it's a great matchup versus the Rams, then the Cardinals, then the Panthers, then the Browns, who, yeah, they're very good against the run, not so good against the pass. But look at the playoff schedule here. Titans, Colts, Bears. That is fantastic for wide receivers. So, look, if you don't need Ricky Pearsall right now, if you're pretty comfortably going to make the playoffs and you're like, okay, I'm looking for guys that can help me in the fantasy playoffs, go take a chance on Ricky Pearsall because he's almost free right now. And then another tight end I think is a fantastic buy. I don't even know if I can call him a buy low because he might be out there on a lot of waiver wires. But if you're in deeper leagues and he's on a fantasy roster, go put out a feeler. Go try to make a trade for Harold Fannin Jr. of the Cleveland Browns. Right now, he's the tight end 6 in expected fantasy points per game over guys like Dallas Goedert, Oronde Gadsden. He's been great. We know the Browns and Dylan Gabriel just love to target the tight end here. And on the season, he's been really good. He's got half his games, he's got double-digit PPR points. In the other half, single-digit. But look, he is a tight end. But talk about it, the schedule is just fantastic for Browns tight ends, especially in the playoffs. Okay, Jets this week coming out of the bye, but then the Ravens, the Raiders. Okay, 49ers, not a tough matchup for tight ends anymore with Fred Warner out. Then the Titans, the Bears, the Bills, the Steelers, and then again, I will say it, if you play in Week 18, he gets the Bengals. He's going to go off in Week 18. Harold Fannin isn't even on the trade chart because he's not even being valued. You could trade away a handcuff running back or something for Harold Fannin if you really need him. And then finally, if you need a quarterback, I think this is a time to go buy low on Jackson Dart. Jackson Dart has actually been pretty good, but he's still not being valued very highly in fantasy circles. You look at it, since week 4 when he took over, he has scored 19 or more fantasy points in all but one game, and he has 15 points in the game he didn't score 19 fantasy points. He scored a rushing touchdown in 5 of his 6 games. He gives you that rushing upside. And look at the Giants' schedule going forward. This week, the Bears, he's going to have a great game. All right, Packers, Lions, Patriots, that's a tough stretch right there. But then look at the fantasy playoffs. The Commanders, the Vikings, the Raiders. He should be great in all those games. That Vikings game is at home, so that should help him there. I think Jackson Dart is a great buy low at the quarterback position. And again, it's not going to take hardly anything to get Jackson Dart. And when we look at these guys on the trade chart here, Ricky Pearsall has a value of 4, Aaron Jones a value of 2, Jackson Dart also a value of 2, and again, Harold Fannin isn't even on here. Like I said, he might just be sitting on your waiver wire, but if not, if he's on somebody's bench, not going to take a lot to get him. There's a lot of guys I would trade away here. Let's just talk about some of the kind of sell highs on here. I think Xavier Worthy is a great sell high, but he's in the Chiefs offense. He's got name value. He might get it done. Same with Kyle Monangai coming off that huge game against the Bengals. Now people think he's going to be like the next Rico Dowdle, but DeAndre Swift was pretty good before his injury there. I don't think Monangai is taking over this backfield. I think it's a great time to sell high. Same with Kareem Hunt coming off a nice game. Pacheco week to week here, but Pacheco will be back. Go sell high on Kareem Hunt if you can. And I think it's a great time to sell high on Jameson Williams. He got a little more involved, but you take out that long touchdown he scored late in the game, he hardly did anything, still not heavily involved here. I think he's a great sell high right now. All right, there you go. More than 10 players you can go buy low on right now to help you win a fantasy championship. But of course, make sure you stay tuned to Fantasy Endgame all week long to help you win in week 10. We got all the videos you need. You can find them in our playlist right here.